Welcome back to Keepers of the Word. You're here with Mike and James. We've put together another great show for you today with the author of Consorting with Spirits, Jason Miller. But before we get into it, James?
Make sure to follow all of our social media outlets, Twitch being our favorite. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to stay up to date with our new content. The views and topics of Keepers of the Word are solely our opinions and do not reflect the opinions of any Masonic Lodge, and specifically not Grand Lodge.
Jason Miller, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Very happy to
We're
have
happy
you.
to have you.
We all read that great book, Consorting with Spirits. There was so much information in that book that I didn't know. And I think when we covered it last, we had, well, I know I have a bunch of questions for you, starting with, how did you get started on your path?
Oh, well, I had a strange experience when I was young. Um, I was on a playground, not one of these foofy playgrounds today. I mean a properly dangerous 1970s playground with concrete and metal and sand, and I might have hit my head or something. I don't really know. I don't remember, but I remember looking up, and when I looked up, it was like all reality was still down there. It was like I looked up from 3 dimensions into something else. And then that triggered just sort of a string of experiences where it would feel like the world would freeze, and I could sense spirits and hear discussions, and then it just kind of went away. But it always stuck with me. It stuck with me as like more real than anything else. And so when I got old enough, I started looking at books on the occult and tarot cards and magic. And then, even though I just lived in central New Jersey, um, really like pretty much South Jersey, so it's not a hugely populous area. I lived in a hick town. Um, I say that affectionately. Uh, I still just managed to make all these connections, right? So, a teacher at the high school, Mrs. Krubner, she asked if she saw me reading a book on tarot cards, asked if I read tarot cards. I said, no, I don't even know where you would get tarot cards because, I was 15. And next thing I knew, she has a deck of tarot cards for me, and some after school. This is how you psychically shield yourself. After that, started heading off to a neighboring town called Lakewood, where I made friends with a guy named Walter who owned a conjure shop. So got to learn how to use some of the powders and oils and so on that are typical in hoodoo and root work. And then it turned out that because when I got a little older, I was working for the school like after care program, and one of the kids that I would really babysit. His mom owned a botanica, so Botanica Legua in Lakewood. Got to know her. And then the biggest connection came with meeting John Mearden Reynolds. I was just after high school now, so I was hanging out at this shop called the Equinox Books and Curios, which was close to the beach. So I would go kind of surfing down at the beach and then walk over to Equinox Books and Curios to see Sue. And John was hanging out there. He is the first Westerner to be ordained as a Ngakpa, sort of a tantric sorcerer. And he was in New Jersey because that's where he grew up, and his parents had died, so he was settling their estate. And he was hanging out, and he made a lot of connections for me to the OTO, and then explained the basics of Tibetan Buddhism. And a few years later, after a stint in the OTO, I decided to go to Nepal and study Tantra. And, it's just one thing after another, just following a thread, really, as the world of the occult opened up. But it all just started with some weird experiences and a mind that couldn't let them go for whatever reason.
It's a pretty big jump going from here to Nepal. Like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna move to Nepal, and that's a pretty big jump. It's a big culture shock too.
Whole other
I
lifestyle.
mean, I would love to go. I would go in a heartbeat.
And and that's the thing. You can. It seems, it seems like really wild, but then you get there and like there's Westerners everywhere. So there's no. It's not like it was when John went over in the 50s. It was definitely. I was definitely not the only Inji in town for sure. But I was really lucky that John made a lot of connections for me, and got me into a lot of rooms that I otherwise wouldn't get into. And I also have to thank my friend Barche Dorje for who teaches in Norway. We just met drinking one night shortly after I arrived, and John wasn't even in country yet, and I was sitting in the Double Dorje diner drinking tongba, and he was like, "You got to come out with me and meet, this crazy Ngakpa Kunzang Dorje." And so I went out. I left Kathmandu, went out to Parping, and lived there with Ngakpa Kunzang Dorje for a month, because the next morning Kunzang Dorje comes in and his translator says, "Well, we're beginning Vajrakalaya ritual this morning. You're here, so you must be meant to be here. Here's your robes. here's your Ngakpa empowerment, and you already have the Vajrakalaya empowerment," which I did. So let's get to it. So like I just went out there on a dare basically, and the next thing I know, I'm in a 3-day long ritual exorcism of the Kathmandu Valley, and it was pretty, and then I lived with him for a month. So yeah, you got to follow the thread really where it goes.
Right.
So going back to your childhood, what would you say was your favorite memory with your first teacher, with the first person that showed you, kind of put you on the path?
Oh, well, man, my favorite memory, I think it was probably going over books that I was reading, with I should call her, Blanche now, but in my head she's always Mrs. Krubner. But just getting advice, because she hadn't necessarily seen all the books that I was reading, because they, like Modern Magic had just come out in the 80s. So she's a generation before me, but she's looking through these and kind of like, oh yeah, this is good, but just, remember to stay sane and protect yourself, and, go off, have adventures, will dare. Don't forget to dare, but don't go crazy either.
Did your parents know?
What's that?
You were going down this path? Did your parents
know?
know?
My parents did know. Yeah. My parents knew pretty quickly. So yeah, and it took them maybe a year or two to realize this isn't going anywhere, right? So at first it was a little weird, because when it's so weird that Stranger Things, the new season, touches on the satanic panic of the 80s. So, I remember being in 7th and 8th grade playing Dungeons and Dragons, and people are being like, oh, it's Satanism and Geraldo Rivera and all this kind of stuff. And then when I actually started to bring home books on witchcraft and mastering witchcraft, where, you're literally like in the beginning of the book, he writes the Lord's Prayer out backwards phonetically. But the panic had passed for the most part. It was already like old news for us. So, my mom was a little wary, but then when it was something that clearly I wasn't going to let go of, they were supportive, if not indulgent. So I would get the Golden Dawn doorstop edition for my 18th birthday and, stuff like that. So I was always a weird kid, though, like before all the occult stuff. My parents weren't very religious, but I would ask them to take me to church. Like they would drop me off at church and then go to breakfast, and I'd hang out at the church all day. So
It's kind of like my dad with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Anytime they came around, he was like, I don't want to talk to you, but give me 1 second. Oh, my son would like to talk to you. And then they wouldn't come back. But that's why he liked to send me out there to him. Good times.
And then, like, by the time I had graduated high school, I had a stone circle in the backyard. So like I could be like, look, I want this corner of the yard, and we're gonna go to a rock quarry, and we're gonna get quarter stones that are about 4 feet high, and then bigger stones to make a stone circle. And my mom is like, well, how about gargoyles for the Northeast? So you can walk in and out, and you have something. And I'm like, cool, yeah, awesome. So in the end, they were cool because they were mostly. They were not very religious or spiritual, and
that's awesome. That's cool. You had a support system. I think that's what more people need. At least for individuals attempting to venture into the occult world. You need a support basis, and it's kind of hard to do that when your family, especially if you're young, a child or teenager trying to do something.
Yeah, there are definitely people who face uphill battles. I had some other battles with my parents, but never around the occult.
So how long were you practicing where you started to think, you know what, maybe I'm going to start teaching people or write something?
Oh goodness. So I started reading tarot and taking up magic at about 15. And I think I wrote my first article for a magazine that I helped start called Behutet in Philadelphia at maybe I was 24, 25. Okay. And just a few articles. And I would teach a couple classes at the local occult stores or to the OTO group in town. But nothing that was like, yeah, I'm going to do this as a career. It was just sort of, things that people were doing. The first course I ever designed was a meditation course. Like it was a 6-class thing. And I was trying to do it as a free thing, right? So at first with the OTO, and then just open to anybody. And what happened is people would come in and people would leave, and we could never do the course because it was always just people wandering in and wandering out. And then a woman named Anne Duckworth, an Alexandrian witch, who owned a shop called the Hand of Aries in Philadelphia. She came to one of my classes and she said, listen, give this course at my shop and we'll charge for it, like money. And we'll split it and it'll go well. So I come in and lo and behold, 9 people, 10 people, but the same 10 people for 6 weeks. Following, okay, this is the first class, then this is the second class, and you can't really grasp what's in the second or third class unless you've done that first one. Nobody's in or out. it was more people, more attention, more focus, and it was all done through the power of money, really. Through attributing value and saying this is worth something. So, this is what it costs.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson. So, thanks, Anne, wherever you are. I saw her, the last time I saw her was a few years ago, but that was one of the first times I started teaching, but I didn't really think of myself as like, yeah, I'm going to be a magic teacher until probably after my first book was written, really. I wrote my first book because New Page asked me if I wanted to write a book, so I was like, sure, because I tore apart one of their authors in a Witchbox article. So and they were like, yeah, you really stuck it to Carl there. You want a book? And I was like, sure.
We need to replace Carl.
What's that?
I said they needed to replace Carl at that point.
Well, and the thing is, Carl went on to become a Catholic.
Oh, wow.
And is one of the best writers on Catholic mysticism that I've ever read. So he found his role. He found his niche. It wasn't witchcraft or paganism. It was, contemplative Catholicism. So, his writings on spells and magic were twaddle. Or dismissing it, really, because he didn't really even acknowledge it. But his writing on contemplative traditions is super solid. So, nothing against Carl McCollman at all.
What would
Just
you
to
say?
clarify, highest respect for his field and where he is in it. But it was after my first book that I started to think like, okay, I now have an approach that I think no one else is taking, and something I want to say that no one else is saying. So I'm going to go and say it in a structured way, and I'm going to attach value to it and make it a business. And that's what I'm going to do as a career. So it definitely wasn't, and by that time it was mid-30s. So, mid-teens to start practicing, mid-20s to start writing and giving a class here and there to peers, really. And then mid-30s to be like, yeah, I'm going to teach. And now I'm pushing 50. So
what would you say your biggest pet peeve when it comes to witchcraft?
IG witches.
no,
TikTok.
I don't really have a pet peeve when it comes to witches or witchcraft. I mean, of course there are silly things out there, but for the most part, I feel compassion for these kids. In so many ways, they're dealing with a much more difficult learning environment than I had. There's more information, to be sure. Like more information and better information. Like you can cut through stuff that we took as gospel that turns out not really to be good factual history and better translations of things. But the age of information has turned into the age of misinformation. So to find that signal amidst the noise is really difficult. Whereas we had to make signal out of anything because there was hardly any noise or signal. So if we got our hands on a book, even if it wasn't the greatest book in the world, if it was Mastering White Witchcraft by Al Manning, right? Well, that might be the only book that you can get right now. So you better work it. And you know what? It's workable. It's not a book that I would be like, you gotta have this book. But it's absolutely a workable book. So the other thing is these kids are, they're under a lens. Everything that they do is on display for everyone. They can't say anything or make a mistake or show ignorance without someone jumping down their throat. It's not a good learning environment. Um, so it's really the price of all of having the world of the occult at their fingertips comes with a high price tag. I have a lot of compassion for them. And there's, so I shouldn't say there's no pet peeves. Like, the pet peeves I have are that people run to the extremes for everything. It's either you think that you should just be able to do anything anywhere at any time with anything because whatever, nothing means anything other than what I want it to, or you're on the other extreme where everything must be done according to this, and if you are not exactly from that culture, then you must not touch it or obey or look at it even. None of which is accurate from people actually in that culture, but it's um but it all boils down to things that I look at and I shake my head at, and it's not so much like, oh, those kids are ruining everything. It really is like, oh man, what a hard time for somebody that really wants to just learn and not you know and the pressure to do this all on display, to do this while having an audience and followers and nonsense like that. I mean, I don't think anybody waits until they're 35 to start teaching. Kids are like 22 and they're like, how do I put together my brand and cohesive teaching? And I'm like, you don't. Like,
Don't.
you take the medicine before you even think about being a doctor. Like, it's so there are things I don't like, but it's not, I don't know, I guess I get tired. There are things I don't like and things that I think are toxic, but I also think that people my generation looking down at them and being like, stupid kids, more like, wow, those kids are really like having their attention span stolen from them purposefully, and they're getting conned. So
Yes.
I feel more compassion than anything else.
It's almost like the information is flooded, it's flooded with
Yeah.
stuff that, and you have to fact check and try to figure out what's more legit than something else. And,
Yeah.
you almost need a background in anything you're going to read today.
But I mean, if that's what you meant by witchcraft, but if you just meant like witchcraft in general, no beef. I consider myself as much of a witch as a magician. And I've been involved with covens and things in the past, and yeah, no qualms there. I know a good deal of witches who could whip together some folk magic and knock a lot of ceremonial magicians whipping out goetic demons, just knock them clean on their asses. So, you know.
What advice would you give your younger self right now?
Oh, goodness. I would say depends on the age. Like if I could go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I would say um money and material things are going to mean a lot more to you than they do in the halcyon bohemia of being a 20 something Gen X slacker in the 90s. And if you put just a little bit of money away, compound interest will do some amazing things. So that would be one thing. But in the end, it would just be like, look, uh, take this all fairly seriously and be respectful of people and don't think that anyone owes you anything. I mean, there were times where I've like walked into rooms and there are times where I've walked out of rooms because it's been like, oh, that teacher didn't, give me what I wanted. Like, well, did I earn it? Did I do anything at all to make that teacher really notice me or say, yes, I should, recognize you as somebody that I should give teachings, that are secret and important to? Probably not. Other teachers that I did, well, then I got. So, uh, the typical advice that an older person would give to a younger person: knock off the hubris. You don't know as much as you think you know. And the other thing would be the head, heart, hand thing that I'm always going on about. Like, magic and witchcraft are really good at answering questions of truth, at establishing truth as far as meaning and truth as far as usefulness. But they really, really, really suck at truth of fact. Like, this is how the universe runs. This is how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. These are the questions that magic, philosophy, and religion just really are awful at. And we want to make it good at. We want the kind of certainty that religion, philosophy, and magic claims to give. Well, I know this is how it is. Why? Because Metatron told me it was, But for truth of facts, I prefer science or a simple, I don't know. Embrace the idea that you don't know everything and that you can't know everything, and operate from that perspective. Just that would be a big piece of advice to a younger self.
What about advice for somebody who is just starting out? What would you give advice to somebody just starting out who doesn't know much of anything, but for some reason had this profound vision or idea that they want to get into this? What would you recommend for them to start?
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd pull them aside and try to talk them out of it.
Yeah, yes. I hear this a lot.
Enormous expense, enormous time suck.
Yeah.
Not the fastest way to getting laid or paid. Can definitely help with both, but if those are like your main concerns in life, then not the fastest route or most direct route to either one of those. But if they had that magic-shaped hole in their heart where it's like, no, I'm driven to this, I would say, before you even pick up a book, close your eyes. What is driving you to this? What does this look like in your head 5 years from now? Just using your imagination. And then let that guide you in what you decide to read, right? Like if in your head a wizard is putting together charts and figures and maps of the occult and weaving complex ceremonies, then shoving folk magic or root work at the person isn't going to satisfy them. At the same time, if walking through the woods, gathering plants and talking to the local spirits is what is in their head, then shoving Aleister Crowley at them or grimoires under their nose isn't going to satisfy them either. So, like, figure out your angle and then read a couple books and then do something from those books and let your actions guide your further studies.
That was well put.
Don't read everything, because you can't read everything now. There's people like me are cranking out too many damn books for you to read them all.
Speaking of books
So,
here, sir. Speaking of
yes.
books, consorting with spirits. I'm gonna say I've read your other books, and this one kind of came out swinging. I was gonna say it was a little heavy hitting. I mean, you jumped right into it, and then the way that you talk about heavy hitting subjects, but the way that you describe them and discuss them is in a way that is easily digestible. So, I mean, I wasn't ready for as much as you put in that book. I was like, wow, oh, okay, I'm gonna put the book down. Oh wait, what's the next chapter? Damn it! And I would read the next chapter. And then something else I'm gonna say. You spoke about the sigil of Lucifer, and you pointed out that it's the Asian symbol. And
Right.
I thought that was cool because nobody ever talks about that. You know, everybody's worshiping Baphomet as Satan or Lucifer, and everybody's getting jumbled with symbols and stuff like that. And here you are pointing out it is what it is. You know, and it's pretty simple to see that.
Well, right. So, take that symbol. So it's from the Grimoire Verum, and it is the symbol of Lucifer in Asia, right? So
Right.
if you were in Asia working the system, that's what you would want to use. But we also have to look around at the reality. So people who hold history as their measure of authenticity will walk around tisking everyone and going, don't they even know that this is the symbol of Lucifer in Asia, the stupid idiots? Can't they read the Grimoire Venom? Don't they know their history? And right? But that's not the only measure of authenticity, right? So, and in fact, it's for me, the historical authenticity is it's not that it's unimportant, but it's one of the less important measures of authenticity for me. Because nothing else do we measure this way. Like if I'm sick, I don't be like, where is the oldest doctor using the most outdated methods? Because that's the guy I want working on my, tumor. So it's, if for me, it's a functional authenticity. That's probably the most important, with all the cultural authenticity and authenticity of meaning kind of tied for second, and then history coming up as a factor. But so we have to look at functional authenticity. Why did this sigil take off? Well, for one thing, it's fundamentally different. Like, open up the Grimoire Verum. You've got 3 seals. 4, really. You've got 2 seals of Lucifer. You've got a seal of Astaroth and a seal of Beelzebub. And doesn't this seal look fundamentally different? Like, one of these things is not like the others. One of these things is a strong geometrical shape that just screams, make me a logo! Like, whereas the other ones are like scribble.
That was cool.
So you've got this idea where, okay, well, why? Is this, so here's the possibilities. Is this actually the hidden hand of Lucifer at work saying, I am hiding this key amidst other hidden keys? This is something that came once in a working with Lucifer, that my hidden keys are hidden amongst other hidden keys. So is this key hidden in this grimoire as like, and this is special, like this isn't just part of the grimoire, this is something more, like on this one page? Maybe it was just something that the person who wrote the grimoire or designed the seals designed, and that the spirit liked and was like, I'm going to go with that one, right? The powers of Lucifer that are like, yeah, this one is awesome. Like, we can do something with this. This'll catch on. This is snappy, right? It's kind of like if you hire Wiser does my covers, but if I was to hire like one of those companies, it's like, get a book cover and they'll submit 5 different designs and you got to pick one. You could almost see like Lucifer looking at the Grimoire Verum, like, oh, this one is bitching. Let's go. Like, if we're gonna do a left-hand path thing in the 20th century, this is the one that's gonna catch on like wildfire.
Send
Good
that one to
graphics.
press.
It's
Right, send that one to press. Or it could just be that humans designed it, humans liked it, and the spirits,
like, that's the one we're going with.
Respond. Right. It's kind of like if you're in a room with somebody and you don't speak the same language, you can make them know that you want their attention, and then you do whatever you can do to make them understand. Well, a lot of spirit contact starts out that way. So, Lucifer's like, all right, you guys want to run with this? I'll run with this. Or maybe none of the above. Maybe it's just humans ran with it and then it became big. But it doesn't make it wrong. You know what I mean? So from the functional authenticity point, it's much more functional as a spreading of an idea, which I think we can just prove by, seeing how many of them are for sale. And, that's something.
There was a part or a chapter in your book where you talk about getting to know the local spirits. What would you say would be the best practice for getting to know the local spirits around you?
So the best practice for getting to know the local spirits is, first of all, work on some spirit skills, including just the ability to sit and be silent and not occupy the mind constantly. This is something that really, has been progressively deteriorating over the last few generations. And then in 2007, we basically took it and shot it in the head with an iPhone, and we killed idle time entirely. We just took it out and buried it. So you've got to recapture the ability to sit and listen and make connections. And this is whether you're a magician or not. If you read 6 books in a row and you don't take any time before going on to the 7th, you're missing out, because your brain needs time and space to make the connections between those books. But in a spiritual way, in the sense of spirits, it's really important. And then there are other exercises, but I would move on to offerings. Like, learn to listen, learn to shut up, learn to listen, and then make offerings every day. I give a spirit feast in the book, right? So wherever you live, set out some offerings, get to know the locals. Then after that, do a little research on your area and start taking field trips, right? Where is interesting where you are? This is an area where the occult and the paranormal can overlap a little bit. Pro tip, every state has a devil's something.
Yeah.
Probably like a dozen of them. It's the Devil's Pool, the Devil's Bridge, the Devil's Cliff, the Devil's,
Devil's Bowl
the
and Devil's Gate.
Swan, whatever it is. The devil's got a thing like everywhere. So chances are there's a good, folklore associated with that. Not necessarily Luciferian in any sense, but there's some good folklore in terms of spirits and fairy and all that. So that would be my top advice. Like, learn to listen, learn to look, listen, receive, lay out offerings at the place where you live and work, and then get out into the areas where spirits might be otherwise. Make some friends. It's kind of like it is with people.
Just
If you move into an area, it can be really nice to host a party and invite the people in your neighborhood over, get to know them, have a nice block party in the summer, or barbecue. And then when you hear about notable people or people you want to meet, or just people at the local places where you might want to make connections, and you go out and you learn the name of the woman at the post office and the owner of the coffee shop and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
I
recently
live in a small town, so I can do all those things reasonably well.
I just recently myself, after reading the book, made an attempt to kind of reach out to the locals. I went over to the cemetery I go to, and after leaving, this was for a couple days or so, like a day after a supper. So I was, leaving my offering there and stuff like that because of that. But I decided again after reading the book, I was like, maybe I should try this, and so I just kind of sat there for a little while and just kind of sat silent. And then I even, said some words, kind of just, letting them know like I'm opening myself up. And then I even was just like, the powerful spirit of the area. You can introduce yourself to me if you feel it's necessary to do so. After I did that again, I sat there, little for a few minutes quietly, and then all of a sudden the wind starts blowing. And there's kittens that live in the cemetery. They're running around. The wind starts blowing, and the kittens come running out of their bush where they live, and they run to this particular grave, like a headstone, and they just start playing around it. And I'm kind of like, So then I just asked, I was like, should I go over there? And then once I said that, a bird flew and landed in front of me, and it just was kind of staring at me, and then it like flew directly towards that thing, and so I'm just like start, evaluating it, is this really happening, or is it just coincidences and stuff like that, but, and then you start getting your hair stands, you get your goosebumps and stuff like that. But so that it was a pretty interesting, situation. I started to walk over to the headstone to check it out, but then there was a weird drug addict guy kind of showed up, so I ended up leaving.
Los Angeles for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, head back. Those kittens probably would have gotten me over there.
Yeah.
So the kittens are like, "Hey, over here," and then the bird is like, "Dude, I sent kittens. What?" like.
Yeah, that's
I'm
kind
running
of
out of animals here.
yeah.
No, the kittens.
And that's kind of exactly what I was feeling too from it. And so, like I said, I started to walk over there, but then this like weird guy walks up to me. He shows up like literally out of nowhere. I didn't even see or hear him. He rode up on a bike, and I didn't hear like one leaf. He was just there all of a sudden. He's asking for cigarettes. I'm like, I'm not smoking. Oh,
what if it was a spirit?
Well, so you know what? So that's
spirit,
actually funny that you say that, right? So after I was talking with a mutual friend, and then she brought that up, and she's like, "What if?" She's like, "Did you leave any particular offering?" I was like, "I did, but not for that, because I was there for, like I said, I was there for another thing." But typically you want to leave like some tobacco or something. From what I've always learned from when dealing with locals, you'll leave like some liquor or like some tobacco. So yeah, they brought that up. She's like, "What if that was something like, hey, you forgot your cigarettes, like, or you forgot the tobacco?" And
Pinch of tobacco.
Yeah, so I did think about that after the fact. Like
Odin used to show up like that, and as a beggar or somebody, an unwanted person, to see if you would help him or let him in, because that was the custom. You were supposed to, because if you were a wayman or somebody who was traveling, that may be the only person you're seeing for the next couple of days, and you just ran out of food, so you got to help them. So
that has happened at a few different teachings. I remember one of the last times I lectured at Thalasis in Philadelphia. This guy came in. I didn't recognize him, but I hadn't been around for a while, and he came in, sat down, and it was like at a corporate boardroom. No, it was at the Ethical Society that I was giving the talk. But it was clear that he was just like a homeless dude who kind of saw the group and started telling this story about how he had to get a train home and all, and it was like, "Hey, do you need some money?" Like, "Okay, sure." And then off he goes. It wasn't me who picked up on it at first, even. It was my friend Howard. So but I was like, "Oh," as soon as he said it, I was like, "Duh!" Like, of course. It's a very common thing to have like that person pop out of the woodwork and ask for an offering. So yeah, it sounds like an intense experience. I would go back and check that grave out.
yeah, I'm
And if
definitely
that guy shows
going
up,
to
give
do
him a
that.
cigarette.
carry some smokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. So we love we love your stuff. We love your books. Both me and Brian practice. We follow you. We think it's great.
Right on.
We're alumni, I guess you can.
We're
call us.
alumni now. Yes. I'm gonna say I don't know about Brian, but I've been a practitioner. I think it's what am I 41, like 30 years now. Like what you said, started young. And
Nice.
I've found foundations of magic teaching and stuff like that, and practice and got nothing. And practice another one and maybe got something. It was like, was that me? Was that a coincidence? And try to duplicate that, going through the processes and stuff. And did the Aleister Crowley, and dabbled with some OTO, Golden Dawn, a bunch of cool stuff, and some stuff worked better than others. I have to say, when I first heard about you, I was taking a traditional witchcraft class, and it was afterwards from another alumni from you. Said, hey, you should check him out, having this conversation about two-ball cane fire and blacksmithing. He brought you up. He goes, well, this is what I practice. If you like traditional witchcraft and stuff, you should check him out. So I got a book, one of your books, and was reading it, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. I kind of like it. It's all familiar. And stuff. But the first time that we actually got together and practiced, it was an experience. And I'm like, wow, man, that's like out of the chute, like real quick. And I'm kind of experienced in this where it's like, okay, it was probably me. Maybe I was excited. I don't know, like why was it so forward? And then the next time happened again, and it kept happening. I'm like, wow, man, this is like just right out the gate. It works. At least in my experience, I haven't had something that happens so fast but consistent. So what's your secret? I mean, like, I know your story, I mean, I can't tell you how many things I've gone through, and I still plow through even if nothing's happening, because that's what practice is, right? You got to keep going,
Right?
keep
Yeah.
going, keep going. But with you, it was like right in the beginning, and I'm like, that's really odd. Like, it has to be me or something, but I wasn't like trying to make anything happen, Why is your practice so much different than others? I know that's very vague in general, but like,
No. And you're talking specifically about the Sorcery of Hecate practice.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so first of all, let me say that experience, while common, is not universal. I have had my detractors, and I've had people take
sure.
the course and kind of build, just like, I didn't get this thing that so many people are talking about. And the thing is, like, I've seen those folks like get shut down in other venues. So I'm like, let's talk about this, So we run through the list, like, are you doing the regular work? Because that's a key element of it, right? Like, are you doing the regular work? And if they say they are, I believe them, like are you, you're keeping up with offerings, you're doing more than the minimum, right? You're doing more than just staying in the game. Because there are occasionally the people that are like, well, I took the course and nothing amazing happened, or I did this, and I'm sure this is for every course out there. And then when the teacher is like, well, what did you do precisely? And they're like, well, I took the course. Like, did you use it? Well, I took it, and it's like, yeah, okay. So obviously it's you didn't actually do any of it, so I don't feel too bad. But some people do, and it's just not the right fit for them. And that's the I say, look, you have to decide like how much effort you want to put in, and whether you want to keep going or not. But thankfully, most people do get the kind of experience that you're talking about, where it's a consistent result over time, and it comes from consistent practice and what I tend to think of as a short lineage or a short telephone game. So there's this idea out there of short lineage versus long lineage. And this even plays out within traditions. So for instance, in Tibet, the Gelugpa school, they like a long lineage. They want to know that what they're practicing goes back to India specifically. Like it shouldn't originate, it can pass through Tibetan hands, but it should originate in Indian hands. Like it should be whereas the Nyingma, and they're into Kama, the fresh revelations from the founder, either ones that were hidden away physically or ones that are mind terma. So not Kama, terma. Kama is the old teachings that Padmasambhava taught while he was alive. And the advantage of terma, the critics can say, well, that's just something some modern Lama pulled out of his butt, right? But if you believe in it, the advantage is a short lineage, right? Telephone game. If there's 150 people in a telephone game and I say, and it goes around, what comes back to me at the end of the telephone game is nothing at all like what I said. But if there's only 2 or 3 people, it's a clear signal. So the Sorcery of Hecate course, Hecate is resonant with history, right? Like, I want to make sure that the research and revelation rhyme. Like, if I get something through vision or revelation and it's like, oh yes, well, Hecate is secretly the sex goddess of love and passion, and then I would be like, yeah, I don't think so. Like something's wrong here. Something, bad connection, or Jay's fantasizing, and whatever it is. I would say, so again, I like things to be resonant with history, but I don't try to recreate it either. So when I was leaving Nepal, I had all this knowledge of Tantra and how magic works in Tantra, as well as how magic works in other systems. And Hecate was like, listen, there's something that I think I can teach, that I can transmit through you, because you have this base knowledge, but you're also not really locked in, right? Like, I had decided that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life studying Tibetan language and becoming a lama and all that. I wanted to go back to the more open world of magic. So Hecate was like, yeah, I have something. Like, you have the right combination of openness and base knowledge for me to transmit something powerful. And so I did, and I worked for 15 years before I taught it, 12 before I shared little bits and pieces with people on the way, but I didn't attempt to teach it as a system until I taught one guy in the apprenticeship program, which then started to tighten it all up. Because sometimes our own practices can be loose, but when we teach it, we have to kind of, it fills in a lot of gaps, like, because students will have questions that maybe you didn't even think of. And then you have to kind of go to the source and say, what about this? And so it was a good 15 years of working this system of trial and error and positive tests and negative tests and mistakes and successes before Hecate was like, okay, now go teach it. And, early on, I was like, let's make it a book. Oh, it's a grimoire. I can't wait. Everybody's doing these grimoires. Andrew Chumley's got all these fantastic grimoires. Only 77 copies of the Grimoire of the Golden Toad and all these things. And they were so cool. And Hecate was like, no books, no grimoire. Not this isn't right for that. This isn't that shape. This needs to be taught with a back and forth. So that's kind of why there's a short lineage connection, and there's an emphasis on regular practice and commitment. And without either one of those, it doesn't quite hold up.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed myself because life is life, and there's times where I can do the full thing, but there's also those times where I can just kind of sit down real quick and do the minimum. Definitely, when I have the when life provides the time, and I can every day do the full thing, lighting all the candles, everything, the incense, everything. I can go, beyond just 100. I try to always do like 300 minimum. But even if you go beyond that, get into 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rounds of the mantra and stuff like that. When I find that all the times when I've been able to, have a good, couple of months where I can do that daily, uninterrupted, where every day is doing the full ritual. Yeah, that's when it really things do really get interesting. Like you're saying, the more that you're doing it fully and not just the minimum, things really start coming through.
Builds momentum. It's a training. It's a training like martial arts, and that's really a different lens than I think a lot of people take towards magic. They don't look at it that way. So yeah, and for those that don't know, he's referring to a recitation of a chant, of a mantra.
Yes.
So the 100 versus 300 and so on.
Yeah, we actually had somebody in the chat room asking, when are you starting the next cycle of the SOH?
For anybody who wants to join.
Starting towards the end of June, beginning of July. I should have it announced by the end of the week. The new cycle of Black School of St. Cyprian starts next Tuesday. So I should have the dates all set. The problem is it's a very busy summer for me as far as family goes. We're taking advantage of the wind down of the pandemic. We're going a couple places and doing a few things. So I want to make sure that I don't give anyone I don't want to have people start a course and then be like, okay, well, you started, but now I'm on vacation, so talk to you guys in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm there for everybody and that I have it all mapped out. So it's just a lot of juggling, really. So I'll figure it out, but soon, very soon.
Awesome. You have any more, Mike?
No, I think that's it. I think I got some closer questions. What are 3 books you recommend that a beginner should read?
3 books, and I'm just going to take myself out of the running, because obviously I think I write most of my books because no one else has written them, so I'll take that out. But it really all depends on what they want to do. The 3 books for a root worker are going to be different than the 3 books for a ceremonial magician, and they're going to be different than 3 books for a witch. I love Mastering Witchcraft by Paul Hewson. Some find it shockingly outdated, but I just love it, and it bridges that gap between. It's not even a gap. It just blows apart that false dichotomy of folk magic and ceremonial magic. Just tears it out of the water and wipes it. Paul wipes his ass with it, which is great because that's how it should be. This fake division doesn't really exist. After that, I would just take a look at, maybe Sarah Mastros's The Big Book of Magical Incense. That has a lot to teach people when it comes down to herbs and what they do, and incense is a fairly universal tool. So I would say that as a new book. But after that, what's your angle? Are you looking for I'd say protection and reversal magic. You should have something in there to deal with difficulty and danger. There's no such thing as completely safe. So nor is the world just rife with danger. So people just, have this weird extreme attitude. Like, you've got people out there like, well, magic is safe and the spirits are safe and they love you and everything is good and magical attacks don't really happen because anybody able to do them is enlightened enough to not want to do it. And that's fantasy. But on the other hand, you've got people that are like, well, if I missed one day of the Hecate mantra, then she's cursing me and I'm obviously the target of the god's wrath. And that's also fantasy. And, the reality is, it's like driving, most of the time, it's perfectly fine, but there are some things that you do and you don't do to stay safe. And if you want to drive really, really fast, or you want to drive in some kind of particularly dangerous way, then you got to up your protection. The seatbelt becomes a 5-point harness. And you wear a helmet and a roll cage.
That's a perfect way to explain it.
Yeah, as a magician, you should know how to work without constant protection everywhere at all times, always. That's like the Excalibur problem I talk about. Like, are you going to walk around in full plate mail armor all the time? Dinner, sex, everything else? No, of course not. It's hindering your dexterity stats. So you want to you want to just hold a certain amount of protection and then have more protection available, and also just allow yourself to deal with danger occasionally. So there you go. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great trifecta of books and ways to think about the whole situation at hand.
Yeah.
I think that's great. James, you have any more questions?
I mean, I can sit here all night. I mean, there's a ton of stuff to pick his brain for sure. What would be the last thing here? Our last question. I mean, what do we have to look next to, Jason? What's next? I mean, you just dropped this book, but what's the future of Jason Miller?
Well, I'm going to keep teaching. I've got a bunch of courses that I teach, so I now have a full work week. People are like, oh, you're lucky to be able to do this as your career, as your job, and make a good living at it. Not just a living, but like a better living than I ever thought I would make. But it's that comes with it being a job.
Yeah.
With it, you've sat through the 5-hour Q&As.
Yes.
But
they're great though. They're great.
part 4 of the 6th Q&A, and as we go into my voice is all short, and
Yes.
I'm like snapping at people.
Stop asking this question.
why
It's the
are you
same
asking me
question.
that? Yeah, like you've asked this 100 times. I've answered this already. Come on, man.
Can you elaborate for the fans? As a person taking your course, I want to kind of share this with the fans that are listening right now to kind of get to know you a little bit better, because you're a pretty funny guy, kind of laid back. I mean, you're teaching heavy hitting subjects, but you're pretty laid back when you're delivering this. Can you let the fans know, if I were to try to get your attention by email and ask you questions and it never got answered, what am I supposed to put in the headlines?
I mean, the reality is, if you're in a course of mine, put the course in the headline, like all caps, strategic sorcery student, or sorcery of Hecate student, or whatever it is. And I will try to answer by Friday. Right? Like I will try to if I don't get you that night or the next night, I'll try to answer by Friday. But if I don't see that in the headline, or if you're just kind of writing me out of the blue, I might not be able to answer.
Right.
So I actually have out there, I started using an autoresponder again to just let people know, like, I thank you so much for writing me, and if you've got like a pithy question that I can answer, then in a sentence or two, there's a really good chance I'm going to get back to you, whether you're in a course or not. But if you've just kind of written me and it's like, you don't know me, but I've just been contacted by Odin to ask you about protection from from my neighbor who practices, Naga magic or whatever, and why do you think that I keep seeing pie everywhere? And I'm just gonna tuck it away.
Delete. My last one.
I used to. And some people are like, well, you should have an assistant. And I'm like, you want me to hire people to answer shit like that I don't want to? Like, no, I'm not doing it. I mean, I can hire somebody if I needed to hire somebody, but like,
not for that.
Not for that, right? So yeah. I mean, if people write me at strategicsorcery@gmail.com. Tell me what course you're in, or if you're interested in a course. And again, if it's something I can answer. There's something that people ask me is like, I'm interested in this course, but is it right for me? Will I be like, I don't fucking know. I don't know anything about you.
Come on, man, give me a break.
They want a psychic reading, basically, or I mean, and sometimes these are not so wild. Like, hey, I'm in the Sorcerer of Hecate course, but I'm also interested in evocation. So, would it be too much for me to take the Black School of Saint Cyprian at the same time? I don't know. Like, how much free time do you have? How much bandwidth do you have? How much money do you have? All of these, I probably wouldn't have been able to do them both at the same time, but I'm a lazy schmuck. So there's, I mean, I have students that are probably put more time into than I do on it, day to day, week to week. I was teaching a meditation course. The guy's like, so I meditate 3 hours a day. And I'm like, God bless you, sir.
I do not.
I do not. I hope I can answer your question and be helpful. But, if it's if you're like, what do I do with that third hour? I'm like, I got nothing for you. Because, unless I'm on retreat, I mean, I'm not meditating 3 hours a day regularly, but that's what they love it. So, yeah. So, I mean, Could they? Yes, people have. People have been like, "Oh my god, it was so cool taking them both at once because they're different, and I could see how they interplay, and you think in both of them." And then I've got other people that are like, "Yeah, that was a lot, so I'm just gonna put it aside and retake that one next cycle and focus in on this." I don't know. Right?
All right, here's a doozy of a question. How many
Yeah.
people, and this is kind of, I get you probably can just guess here. How many people are currently, right now, following Jason Miller? And I don't mean like your Twitter or Facebook. How many practitioners are out there? Student-wise.
Oh goodness. I don't know. There's I mean, at any given time, there's a few hundred people actively enrolled in courses of mine.
Right.
At any given moment. But then there's alumni that, have taken the courses and they still follow along. Sometimes they're just listening to the new Q&As because they've already taken the course like 3 or 4 times. Or they just follow me and they consider themselves my student in the way that I consider myself the student of my teachers, even though I'm not sitting with them and talking with them all the time. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it depends on what context. Like actively at any given moment, there are a few hundred people enrolled in things at any given time. But beyond that, the mailing list is a few thousand. But and it's a high engagement mailing list.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that they're all like my students. And the other thing too is I'm not proprietary, right? Like there are people, sometimes people, especially from like the Wiccan community, have written me about like something one of my students said or did, or and they're like, "You've got to get your student in line." And I'm like, this is just like, they're not in my coven or something like that. Like I don't run their life. They took a course with me, right?
Yeah.
Like
They're a free
they
human.
took a course. I'm not taking responsibility for everything they say, do, or think in every avenue of life. But there are some systems where it's like that, like, right? Like I will only initiate you if I am your superior forever, and that's not how I think of things.
Well, Jason, where can people find you?
People can find me at strategicsorcery.net. I really should just get the .com. I'm just too lazy. Like I'm the word, like I guess I'm good at marketing because it's successful, but as far as like doing all the things like the marketing people say to do, I don't pay attention to any of it. Like keyword stuff and getting the right URL and search engine optimization. I just don't do any of that. So I mean, maybe I should take it like a summer and figure out all that stuff and build an even bigger audience. But I'm good for now.
That's cool.
So yeah, strategicsorcery.net. You'll find the blog. You'll find me on the different socials, and that's it. Yeah.
Is there any shout outs you want to give to anybody right now before we leave?
Oh goodness. I just before we came on, Lonnie Scott interviewed Jack Grail on his show, so I'll give a shout out to Lonnie Scott and Jack Grail, both friends of mine, and so maybe I heard they probably mentioned me on that show, so I'll mention them on this show, and it will all be a weird circle. It's like that Matthew McConaughey show. It's like a flat circle of, so yeah.
All right.
But,
well,
shout out to everybody trying to trying to be sane and make magic and do stuff earnestly and not get bogged down in the poppycock.
Yeah,
Agreed.
the rat
James,
race.
you got anybody?
As usual, hello to everybody out there. Just want to give my normal shout outs to all the local metaphysical stores, witch stores, whatever you want to call them. Go there. Try them out locally. See what's around you guys. Like Jason Miller said, go out, find out what's around you. I have done enough of that for you guys. I want you guys to hit me up and let me know what's going on out there. Just to everybody who's out there, like he said, practicing, seeking something that you want more out of life. Go for it. Brian?
First of all, to Jason, thank you again for doing this. And it was a big deal, I know, for myself and James in particular, being students of yours. It was really, really awesome to have you do this with us tonight. To all the brothers out there, whithersoever dispersed, and my usual shout out to the fans. Thank you for listening. You're the reason why we do this, for supporting us, and we just try to bring these different topics, to you guys to educate you on different things that are out there in the world that you probably didn't have thrown in your face, from family members and things like that. It's okay to look into other stuff. It's fine. And then my normal shout out to each and every person out there trying to be a better version of yourself tomorrow than you were today. Keep it up. You're doing awesome. Mike.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and making our show fun. But most of all, my team, thank you guys. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. However you're watching this, comment below and let us know what your favorite part of the show was. For questions regarding the show, content ideas, booking inquiries, or just simply to say hello, visit the contact page at keepersoftheword.net. That's it for this episode.